I'm May Lyn Cruz, professor from the Department of Theory of the College of Fine Arts, University of the Philippines. I will be talking about visual artist Galo Ocampo's work in the Cultural Center of the Philippines' 21st Century Art Museum collection titled Talaba I, 1979. I first encountered the broad series that this work belongs to as I was finishing my studies in art history in college. Like many, my exposure to Galo Ocampo was mostly limited to the highlights of his biography and his body of work. That Galo Ocampo was a third of the triumvirate of Philippine modern art alongside Victorio Edades and Carlos Botong Francisco. He was the artist behind the iconic Brown Madonna and the Ecce Homo and Flagellants paintings. It was only after an unplanned visit to the house of a casual art collector in the early 2000s that I was exposed to the anthropographic and shell series of Galo Ocampo for the first time. It was completely new to me, very unlike the imagery I associated with the artist. With my curiosity piqued, I borrowed Galo Ocampo books from the library to quote-unquote verify if the Galo Ocampo I saw was a real Galo Ocampo. One of the books the library loaned to me was the monograph on the 50th year retrospective of the artist in 1982, held at the Museum of Philippine Art. It was there that my appreciation of Galo Ocampo's body of work expanded. It was also in that monograph that I first saw this Talaba painting. Seeing it in person now is a pleasant reunion of sorts. Talaba I is an oil-on-canvas painting by Galo Ocampo from 1979. The title given by the artist, Talaba, meaning oyster, immediately forces our mind and our vision to unify the mass of curved forms as the calcified valves of an oyster. To its right of center is the grayish mass of curlicues representing a bountiful cluster of pearls. Without prior knowledge of the title, however, what many will likely see is the amassing of irregularly curving organic forms in ochres of yellows, oranges, and browns with touches of grayish-green here and there. The formation is massive such that it occupies the entire picture plane. Framing the formation are folds of gray that outline the mass. Without knowing the title, perhaps we will see an oyster, perhaps we won't. Now I'd like to situate this painting against the two artworks that I have mentioned earlier, for which, as critic Leo Beneza wrote, Galo Ocampo's name is forever enshrined in Philippine art history. Brown Madonna from 1938 is iconic for being the first deliberate attempt to indigenize a Christian icon in a modern manner. It is tightly connected to our appreciation of Galo Ocampo as a member of the pre-war triumvirate of Philippine modern art that criticized conservatism and academicism in Philippine art. Painted when he was 25 years old, Brown Madonna is an exemplar of the artist's interest in modernism with indigenization. Ecce Homo, Behold the Man, on the other hand, was painted in 1953, a post-war creation of the artist. The Christ, crowned with thorns, hooded and bound, towers above a wasteland with contrails of warplanes from all directions, framing him against the gloomy sky. The painting's strong emotional impact is driven by the artist's stylistic use of surrealism and expressionism. By this time, Galo Ocampo was no longer a young man, but a 40-year-old adult who experienced, participated in, and survived the war. Ecce Homo is a clear manifestation of an artist who was keenly observant, engaged, and critical of the progress, or should we say, deterioration, of society. And now, we have Talaba I, painted in 1979, almost 3 decades after Ecce Homo. If we force ourselves to find formal continuities, we can probably say the artist has an inclination for the ochre earth tones and maybe some consistency in the organic curl motifs as seen in the landscape of the Ecce Homo and the exteriors and edges of the oyster. What would be more helpful, however, is to recognize and inquire into the difference of Talaba I from the two earlier works. While Galo Ocampo is famous in the visual arts as an artist, writer, and educator, he also wore many other hats, including as director of the National Museum from 1962 to 1968. It was during his administration that Robert Fox, chief anthropologist of the National Museum, actively explored the cliffs of Palawan, turning up, most notably, the Manunggul jar and the Tabon skull cap. These archaeological discoveries dramatically altered what we knew about Philippine prehistory, emphasizing the existence of Philippine pre-colonial culture and society. The Manunggul jar and the Tabon skull cap have since been declared national cultural treasures. Director Galo Ocampo participated in several of these Palawan cave explorations, which directly impacted his oeuvre. In 1973, at 60 years old, he held his first one-man show of anthropographic design, composed of surreal images of rugged rock formations, stalactites and stalagmites, of early man and woman, in watercolor. A few years later, he would focus on oysters, this time on canvas. It appears that the archaeological significance of the oyster as food source for the prehistoric people, as well as its interesting form, composed of irregular layers of calcifications, was a fascinating theme for artistic exploration for Galo Ocampo. His Talaba series includes, as the CCP artwork shows, the mollusk as the sole gigantic image almost bumping against the edges of the canvas. The artist intervenes in image making by not giving us a mimetic copy of the oyster, but an oyster that is, as one may choose to see it, either simplified or made complex, either taken apart or reassembled. It is actually here that we see the biggest consistency of Galo Ocampo. As a critic of conservative art, from the very beginning, he was against merely copying nature. Nature, for him, was a springboard into creativity, to a world of make-believe. The job of a painter, for Galo Ocampo, is to recreate nature. Hence, we may see in Talaba I an oyster or a somewhat oyster. Aware of the archaeological context, we may even see, in the two protrusions in the upper left, an echo of the Manunggul jar figures. At the lower right, the outlines of two human forms. Without knowing the title, perhaps we will see the oyster, perhaps we won't. My 7-year-old daughter, for example, interprets the painting as capes and clothes and accessories floating on water. I can say she has fully immersed into the world of make-believe created by the artist. Talaba I, in being a not iconic and not major work of Galo Ocampo, is significant. It reminds us that an appreciation of the body of work of an artist really cannot be reduced by simply looking at the iconic and popular works. The Talaba painting connects to a significant phase in the career of Galo Ocampo. It reminds us that he is not just a figure in pre-war, post-war modern art narrative, but a creative individual with a sustained and multifaceted and significant practice, in this case, as director of the National Museum and an archaeology and history advocate. Thank you for joining me in this episode of Cultural Cash Online.